Stay stitching is a row of stitching through a single layer of fabric. It is done to prevent stretching on curved edges. In this pattern we have to stay stitch the neck edges and also the side front edges. Begin your stay stitching at the shoulder. Stay stitch about 1.2 centimeters away from the edge, not quite at the seam line, and you go from the shoulder towards the center front neckline. Once you get there, stop. Then flip your fabric piece over and start sewing from the opposite shoulder towards the center front again. You need to repeat this process on the back neckline as well. Stay stitching is also done at the sides of the center front panel. This time it's because we're going to put some little clips in towards the stitching and we don't want the clips to go any further than the stay stitch line. You need to do this on both sides of the center front panel. Clip the side edges of the center front panel about 1.5 to 2 centimeters apart and no more than about 1 centimeter from the edge. This is to allow the straight edge of the center front panel to fit the curve of the side front panels. As you can see, the side front panels are quite curvy to fit the bust line. Place the side front panel on the table and right sides together put the center front panel over the top of it. You need to match the seam right at the very top and around where the armhole is going to be. Make sure the edges line up as you pin and allow the center front panel where you have nicked it, allow those nicks to open up a little bit to follow the curve. Use plenty of pins to make sure you get those edges staying right on top of each other. It's always a little bit harder to sew on a curve, so you really need to put lots of pins in. Make sure the curved panel is against the sewing machine so that you're actually sewing on the center front panel and you're using a 1.5 seam allowance, and you start sewing right where the armhole is, right at the very top with a back stitch. Take the pins out as you come to them and make sure you sew the curve of the side front panel. So you're using your left hand just to pivot a little bit, to pivot the fabric so that you are sewing in a curve. Every now and again you might need to leave the needle down, lift the presser foot and just turn the fabric a little bit. If you try and straighten the fabric, you'll end up sewing sort of some tucks or pleats accidentally. Finally, make sure you back stitch at the end. Start by ironing the seam closed first, just to set the stitches. So you're ironing it while it's flat on the board. Then iron just with the tip of the iron, pressing the seam allowances towards the center front, just kind of nudging the seam with the tip of the iron so you don't squash all that lovely shaping you've put into the bodice. While the pattern piece is still on the fabric, you need to mark the darts. You can mark the top of the dart, the point of the dart with a pin, and the base of the dart at the waistline with a couple of little nicks in line with the markings on the pattern. If I peel the pattern back, I can just find out where the point of the dart is from my first pin and just mark it with another pin. To prepare the dart for sewing, pinch the fabric so the right sides are together and so that the two markings at the waistline are right on top of each other. The pin for the point of the dart should be right on the edge or the fold of the fabric. And put a few pins along the length of the dart to hold it into position for you to sew. We'll be sewing from the waistline up towards the very tip or point of the dart. Always sew the dart from its widest point towards the very point of the dart. In this case it's from the waistline towards the centre of the back. Backstitch at the end and try to imagine an invisible line directly from the base of the dart to the point. Just keep rechecking that your invisible line is in position. When you get to the top, you should be ready to run off the fabric. So you're right on the fold line. You do actually run off the fabric. You keep sewing past the point of the dart, even though there's no fabric there. Leave nice long threads before you cut them. Before you iron the dart, tie a single knot at the point of the dart to stop it from unraveling. Clip the thread. So firstly iron it flat on the board, so you're ironing the fold of the dart. And then you use the iron to nudge the dart seam towards the centre back. Now we're going to stitch the bodice front to the bodice back at the shoulder seams. Place them right sides together and line up the shoulders. Make sure the edges are right on top of each other and pin. Sew with a 1.5 seam allowance from the armhole edge towards the neck edge along the shoulder seam and backstitch at either end. Repeat for the other shoulder. Iron the shoulder seams flat first on the ironing board and then iron each of the seams open. This will reduce bulk when we're sewing the lining and the bodice together. This pattern will require you to make a full bodice out of your main fabric and a full bodice out of your lining fabric. So everything you have done to make your main bodice, you also do for the lining.